In the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, a kind old man's sudden death shocks everyone, but not Miss Jane Marple. While the police call it a heart attack, she spots clues they miss. A crushed rose, a mysterious stranger, and a threatening note to young Lucy. As secrets unravel, Miss Marple uncovers a greedy plot over a valuable cottage, with danger closing in. Will her sharp mind outwit the culprits before it's too late? Dive into a twisty tale of murder, mystery, and a clever spinster who sees what no one else does. Chapter 1. The Whisper in the Village. The little village of St. Mary Mead buzzed with its usual quiet charm. The sun peeked through the morning mist, painting the cobblestone paths and tidy gardens in soft gold. Miss Jane Marple sat in her favourite armchair by the window, her knitting needles clicking softly. Her sharp eyes, hidden behind gentle wrinkles, watched the world outside. The village seemed peaceful, but Miss Marple knew better. In a place like this, secrets hid in plain sight, like weeds in a flower bed. She adjusted her shawl and sipped her tea. Her cottage was cosy, filled with the scent of lavender and old books. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, marking the slow rhythm of village life. But today, something felt off. Miss Marple's instincts, honed by years of watching people, told her trouble was brewing. She couldn't say why yet, but her heart gave a little tug, like a loose thread in her knitting. Outside, the postman cycled by, his bag bulging with letters. Mrs. Price, the baker's wife, waved to him from her shop across the lane. 2 children ran past, giggling, their school bags bouncing. Everything looked normal, but Miss Marple noticed a stranger lingering by the village green. He wore a dark coat, too heavy for the mild spring day, and his hat was pulled low over his eyes. He stood by the old oak tree, pretending to read a newspaper, but his eyes darted around like a fox sniffing danger. Miss Marple's needles paused. "Curious," she murmured. Strangers weren't rare in St. Mary Mead, but this man didn't fit. He wasn't a tourist snapping photos of the church or a relative visiting family. His movements were too careful, too watchful. She made a mental note of his scuffed shoes and the way his coat sagged on one side, as if hiding something heavy. The doorbell chimed, snapping her from her thoughts. Miss Marple set her knitting aside and rose, smoothing her skirt. She opened the door to find her young friend, Lucy Hale, standing there, her face pale and her eyes wide. Lucy was barely 20, with curly brown hair and a habit of talking too, fast when nervous. "Miss Marple, oh, I'm so glad you're home." Lucy clutched a crumpled letter in her hand. "Something awful's happened. I don't know what to do." "Come in, dear," Miss Marple said calmly, guiding Lucy to the sitting room. "Sit down and tell me everything. A cup of tea will help." Citoyen plopped onto the sofa, her hands shaking. Miss Marple poured tea from the pot, her movements steady, her mind already working. Lucy's distress was real, but Miss Marple knew better than to jump to conclusions. People often hid the truth, even from themselves. "It's about Mr. Grayson," Lucy said, her voice trembling. "You know, the old man who lives at Rose Cottage. He's dead." Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted slightly, but her face stayed calm. "Dead? Oh dear, how did it happen?" Lucy took a shaky sip of tea. "They found him this morning in his garden. The police say it was a heart attack, but I don't believe it. He was fine yesterday. I saw him pruning his roses, whistling like always. And then this letter came." She held up the crumpled paper, her fingers tightening around it. Miss Marple took the letter gently, her eyes scanning the messy handwriting. It was addressed to Lucy, with no return address. The words were short and sharp. "Stay out of it, or you'll be next." No signature, just a smudge of ink at the bottom. "When did you get this?" Miss Marple asked, her voice soft but firm. "This morning, just after I heard about Mr. Grayson," Lucy said. "It was in my mailbox, no stamp, nothing. Someone must have slipped it in during the night. Miss Marple, I'm scared. What if it wasn't a heart attack?" Miss Marple folded the letter and set it on the table. Her mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. Mr. Grayson, a quiet widower, kept to himself but was well liked. He grew prize-winning roses and shared them with neighbours. A heart attack wasn't impossible. He was in his 70s, but Lucy's fear and the threatening letter suggested something darker. "Tell me about Mr. Grayson," Miss Marple said. "Did he have enemies? Anyone acting strange around him? Lately?" Lucy frowned, thinking. "He was kind, but, well, he could be stubborn. Last week he argued with Mr. Baxter, the new grocer. Something about a delivery mix-up. And then there's that man who's been hanging around the village. I saw him near Rose Cottage a few days ago, just standing there, watching." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "The stranger by the oak tree. Describe this man," she said. "Tall, dark coat, hat low over his face," Lucy said. "I couldn't see much, but he gave me the creeps, like he didn't belong." Miss Marple nodded. The same man. She didn't believe in coincidences. "Lucy, dear, you must be careful. Don't tell anyone about this letter yet, not even the police. Let me think on it." "But shouldn't we tell Inspector Craddock?" Lucy asked. "He's already at Rose Cottage poking around." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Inspector Craddock is a fine man, but the police have their ways. Big, noisy ways. Sometimes the truth hides in the quiet details. Let's keep this between us for now." Lucy nodded, though her hand still trembled. Miss Marple patted her arm. "Go home, lock your doors, and don't worry. I'll visit Rose Cottage this afternoon. I have a feeling Mr. Grayson's roses might tell us something." After Lucy left, Miss Marple returned to her armchair, her knitting untouched. She stared out the window, but her mind was far from the peaceful village scene. A death, a threatening letter, a stranger who didn't fit. The pieces didn't add up yet, but they would. They always did. By noon, Miss Marple put on her coat and hat, grabbed her walking stick, and headed to Rose Cottage. The village was alive now, with neighbours whispering in doorways. News of Mr. Grayson's death had spread like wildfire. Mrs. Price stood outside her bakery, wiping floury hands on her apron, her eyes darting toward Rose Cottage. "Terrible thing, Miss Marple," Mrs. Price called. "Poor Mr. Grayson, gone just like that. Heart attack, they say." "Yes, so I heard," Miss Marple said, pausing. "Did you see him yesterday, Mrs. Price? He was so fond of his garden." "Oh, aye, he was out there all day, fussing over his roses," Mrs. Price said. "Seemed right as rain. Though I did see that new fellow, the one in the dark coat, walking. By his gait, looked shifty if you ask me." Miss Marple nodded, filing the detail away. "Thank you, Mrs. Price. I'll pay my respects." Rose Cottage sat at the edge of the village, its stone walls covered in climbing roses. The garden was Mr. Grayson's pride, a burst of red, pink and yellow blooms. But today it felt eerily still. A police car was parked outside, and Inspector Craddock stood by the gate, talking to a young constable. His broad face was serious, but he brightened when he saw Miss Marple. "Miss Marple, what brings you here?" he said, tipping his hat. "Just paying my respects," she said, her voice mild. "Poor Mr. Grayson, such a shock." "It's sad, all right," Craddock said. "Doctor says it was his heart. Found him by the rose bushes this morning. No signs of a struggle. We're just wrapping up." Miss Marple's eyes wandered to the view garden. The roses were perfect, not a petal out of place, but something caught her attention. A single bush near the back fence was damaged, its stems bent, a few flowers crushed. It wasn't much, but to Miss Marple it was like a shout in a quiet room. "May I take a look at his roses?" she asked. "He was so proud of them." Craddock shrugged. "Go ahead, just don't touch anything we've marked." She nodded and walked slowly through the garden, her stick tapping the ground. The constable followed, watching her curiously. Miss Marple stopped by the damaged rosebush, crouching to inspect it. The soil beneath was disturbed, not like the neat rows around the other plants. A faint mark, like a boot print, pressed into the dirt, too big for Mr. Grayson's small feet. She glanced around. The back fence backed onto a narrow lane, hidden by trees, easy for someone to slip in unnoticed. She straightened, her mind racing. A heart attack might fool the police, but not her. Not when the roses were whispering secrets. "Find something, Miss Marple," Craddock called, half joking. "Oh, just admiring his work," she said, smiling. Such a shame to lose him. Back home, Miss Marple sat with a fresh pot of tea, her notebook open. She jotted down what she knew. Mr. Grayson's death, the threatening letter to Lucy, the stranger in the dark coat, the damaged rosebush, the boot print. Small clues, but they were threads in a larger pattern. She thought of her old friend Mrs. Bantry, who once said, "Jane, you see things nobody else does, because you look where nobody else bothers." The stranger was key. He'd been seen near Rose Cottage and the village green. Mrs. Price called him shifty, and Lucy said he gave her the creeps. Miss Marple trusted feelings like that. They often hid truths the mind hadn't caught up to yet. But who was he? A hired man? A relative with a grudge? And why warned Lucy to stay out of it? She flipped through her notebook, recalling past cases. People killed for love, money, or revenge. Mr. Grayson had no family, but his cottage was valuable, and his roses had won prizes at county fairs. Could jealousy be a motive? Or was it about the land? Developers had been sniffing around St. Mary Mead lately, offering big money for old properties. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Mrs. Price, her apron still dusted with flour. "Miss Marple, I hope I'm not bothering you," she said, twisting her hands. "It's about Mr. Grayson. I didn't tell the police, but I saw something odd last night." Miss Marple ushered her inside. "What did you see, dear?" Mrs. Price lowered her voice. "I was closing up the bakery late, around 9. I saw that stranger again by the lane behind Rose Cottage. He was talking to someone, couldn't see who." Chapter 2. Shadows in the Lane. The morning sun climbed higher over St. Mary Mead, casting long shadows across the village. Miss Jane Marple sat at her kitchen table, her notebook open, a pencil tapping lightly against her lips. The events of yesterday, Lucy's fear, the threatening letter, Mr. Grayson's death, and the stranger in the dark coat swirled in her mind like leaves in a breeze. She hadn't slept much, not because she was worried, but because her brain refused to rest when a puzzle was afoot. Her tea steamed in its cup, untouched. She'd written down every detail: the crushed rose bush, the boot print, Mrs. Price's story of the argument behind Rose Cottage. Each clue was a thread, and Miss Marple was determined to weave them into a pattern. The police, led by Inspector Craddock, called Mr. Grayson's death a heart attack. But Miss Marple wasn't convinced. Hearts didn't stop without reason, and that threatening letter to Lucy screamed trouble. She glanced out the window. The village was waking up. The milkman rattled by with his cart, and Mrs. Harper, the vicar's wife, swept her front steps. Across the green the stranger was gone, but Miss Marple hadn't forgotten him. His heavy coat and sneaky glances stuck in her mind like a burr. She needed to see the lane behind Rose Cottage and talk to Lucy again. Young people often notice things they didn't realize were important. Miss Marple tucked her notebook into her bag, pulled on her coat, and grabbed her walking stick. She locked her cottage and set off, her steps slow but steady. The air smelled of fresh grass and baking bread from Mrs. Price's shop. Villagers nodded as she passed, their faces a mix of curiosity and sadness. Mr. Grayson's death was the talk of St. Mary Mead, and Miss Marple's ears were open to every whisper. She stopped by Lucy Hale's cottage first. It was a small, tidy place with daffodils lining the path. Lucy answered the door in a hurry, her curls messy, her apron dusted with flour. "Miss Marple, I was just baking to calm my nerves. Did you find anything?" "Not yet, dear," Miss Marple said, stepping inside. The kitchen smelled of warm scones, and a tray sat cooling on the counter. "But I'm going to Rose Cottage to look at that lane. I'd like you to come with me. You saw that stranger there, and your eyes might catch something I miss." Lucy hesitated, twisting her apron. "I'm still scared, Miss Marple. That letter. What if someone's watching me?" Miss Marple's voice was gentle but firm. "Fear is natural, Lucy, but it won't help us find the truth. Stick close to me, and we'll be fine. People don't bother an old lady and her friend in broad daylight." Lucy managed a small smile. "All right, let me grab my coat." The two set off toward Rose Cottage, the village buzzing around them. Miss Marple noticed Mr. Baxter, the grocer, outside his shop, unloading crates. He was a burly man with a red face, and his eyes flicked toward them before looking away. Lucy had mentioned his argument with Mr. Grayson over a delivery mix-up. Miss Marple made a mental note to visit his shop later. Arguments could hide bigger. Grudge's Rose Cottage looked the same as yesterday, its roses bright but silent. The police car was gone, and the garden gate stood open. Miss Marple led Lucy to the back fence, where the narrow lane ran behind the property. The lane was little, more than a dirt path, shaded by tall trees and overgrown hedges. It was quiet, the kind of place where secrets could hide. "Here's where I saw that man," Lucy whispered, pointing to a spot near the fence. "He was standing right there, looking at the cottage." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes scanning the ground. The lane was muddy from recent rain, and she spotted several footprints. Most were small, likely from villagers taking shortcuts, but one stood out, a large, deep print with a jagged tread, like the boot mark by the rose bush. She crouched, careful not to disturb it, and traced the outline with her finger. "Lucy, look at this," she said. "Does it remind you of anything?" Lucy squinted. "It's big like a man's boot. Maybe like the stranger's? His shoes looked worn, but I didn't get a good look." Miss Marple straightened, her mind clicking like her knitting needles. The print was fresh, likely from last night. If it matched the one in the garden, it could mean the stranger had been inside Mr. Grayson's property. But why? To scare him? To steal something? Or worse? She walked along the lane, her stick poking at the underbrush. Near the fence, she found a scrap of fabric caught on a thorn, a dark woolly thread, like from a coat. She tucked it into her pocket, her face calm, but her heart quickening. Small things, like threads and footprints, often told the biggest stories. "Let's check the garden again," Miss Marple said. They slipped through a gap in the fence, back into Mr. Grayson's rose garden. The damaged bush was still there, its broken stems stark against the neat rows. Miss Marple knelt again, inspecting the soil. The boot print was clearer in the daylight, and it matched the one in the lane. Same size, same jagged tread. "Someone was here," she murmured, "and they weren't careful." Lucy shivered. "Do you think they hurt Mr. Grayson?" Miss Marple didn't answer right away. She stood brushing dirt from her skirt. "We don't know yet, dear, but we're getting closer." As they left the garden, Miss Marple noticed a glint in the grass near the fence. She bent down and picked up a small, shiny object, a cigarette lighter, cheap but new, with the initials TB scratched on the side. She slipped it into her pocket with the fabric scrap. TB, she thought. No one in the village had those initials, as far as she knew, but the stranger might. Back on the village green, Miss Marple decided to visit Mr. Baxter's shop. Lucy trailed behind, still nervous. The grocer's shop was busy, with customers buying bread and vegetables. Mr. Baxter stood behind the counter, his apron stained, his smile tight. "Good morning, Miss Marple," he said, his voice loud. "Terrible about Mr. Grayson, isn't it? Such a nice man." "Yes, very sad," Miss Marple said, her eyes wandering over the shop. Jars of jam lined the shelves, and a stack of delivery receipts sat by the till. "Lucy mentioned you had a disagreement with him last week. Something about a delivery." Mr. Baxter's face reddened. "Oh, that was nothing. Just a mix-up with his order. He wanted extra sugar, but I sent flour by mistake. He got a bit cross, but we sorted it out." Miss Marple smiled. "Of course. Did you see anyone unusual near his cottage lately? A stranger, perhaps?" Mr. Baxter's eyes flicked to the side, just for a moment. "Can't say I have. Been too busy here." He turned to a customer, ending the conversation. Miss Marple thanked him and left, Lucy at her side. Outside, she whispered, "He's hiding something. Did you see how he looked away?" Lucy nodded. He seemed nervous. And he never mentioned the stranger, even though Mrs. Price saw him near the shop too. Miss Marple's mind was busy. Mr. Baxter's quick dismissal felt forced, and his argument with Mr. Grayson might not be as small as he claimed. She needed more information, but pushing too hard now would make him clam up. People like Mr. Baxter talked when they thought no one was listening. "Let's head home, Lucy," Miss Marple said, "but keep your eyes open. If you see that stranger again, don't approach him. Just tell me." At her cottage, Miss Marple spread her clues on the table: the threatening letter, the fabric scrap, the cigarette lighter. She added a note about Mr. Baxter's behaviour and the footprints. The puzzle was growing, but pieces were still missing. Who was T.B.? Why warn Lucy to stay out of it? And what did the stranger want with Mr. Grayson? That afternoon, Miss Marple visited the vicarage, hoping Mrs. Harper might know something. The vicar's wife was a chatterbox, always eager to share village gossip. Over tea and biscuits, Mrs. Harper leaned close, her eyes wide. "I heard Mr. Grayson was planning to sell Rose Cottage," she said. "A developer from London came by last month, offering a fortune. Mr. Grayson said no, but the man kept pushing. I saw him in the village a few days ago, a tall fellow in a dark coat." Miss Marple's heart skipped. "Did he give a name?" "Not to me," Mrs. Harper said, "but he stayed at the Blue Boar Inn. You might ask there." Miss Marple thanked her and made a mental note to visit the inn. The developer could be the stranger or someone working for him. If Mr. Grayson refused to sell, it might explain the argument Mrs. Price overheard. Money made people do desperate things. That evening, Miss Marple walked to the Blue Boar Inn, a cosy pub with low ceilings and a crackling fire. The innkeeper, Mr. Dobbs, greeted her warmly. "Miss Marple, come for a sherry." "Just a chat," she said, smiling. "I heard a gentleman from London stayed here recently. Tall, dark coat?" Mr. Dobbs nodded. "Aye, a Mr. Thomas Blake. Kept to himself, left yesterday. Paid in cash and didn't talk much. Said he was here on business." Miss Marple's fingers tightened on her stick. "Thomas Blake. T.B. The initials on the lighter. Did he mention Mr. Grayson or Rose Cottage?" "Not a word," Mr. Dobbs said. "But he asked about the village, who owned what, that sort of thing. Seemed interested in land." Miss Marple thanked him and walked home, her mind racing. Thomas Blake, a developer, likely wanted Rose Cottage. Mr. Grayson's refusal could have sparked trouble. The threatening letter to Lucy suggested she'd seen or heard something dangerous, and the footprints tied the stranger to the garden where Mr. Grayson died. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting in her lap. The police saw a simple heart attack, but she saw a web of greed and secrets. Tomorrow she'd talk to Inspector Craddock and share just enough to steer him toward the truth without revealing her hand. She'd also watch Mr. Baxter and look for Thomas Blake. The strange... Chapter 3. The Trail of Secrets. The morning air in St. Mary Mead was crisp, with a hint of dew still clinging to the grass. Miss Jane Marple sat at her breakfast table, a slice of toast untouched beside her teacup. Her notebook lay open, filled with neat handwriting, the threatening letter, the cigarette lighter with T.B. scratched on it, the dark wool thread, the boot prints, and Mr. Baxter's nervous glance. Last night's visit to the Blue Boar Inn had given her a name, Thomas Blake, and a motive, land. Rose Cottage was at the heart of this puzzle, and Miss Marple was determined to find out why. She sipped her tea, her sharp eyes flicking to the window. The village was stirring, with children skipping to school and the postman making his rounds. But her mind was on Thomas Blake, the stranger who'd left too quickly. He'd asked about land, and Mr. Grayson had refused to sell. That refusal, she suspected, was why he was dead. The police still called it a heart attack, but Miss Marple saw threads of a darker story: greed, threats, and a man who didn't belong. Today, she'd visit Inspector Craddock to nudge him toward the truth, without giving away her clues. She'd also talk to Lucy again and check Mr. Baxter's shop for more hints. People like Mr. Baxter, with their quick smiles and shifty eyes, often let secrets slip when pressed just right. Miss Marple tucked her notebook into her bag, put on her hat, and grabbed her walking stick. As she stepped outside, the village felt quieter than usual, as if holding its breath. She passed Mrs. Price's bakery, where the smell of fresh bread wafted out. Mrs. Price was sweeping the doorstep, her face tight with worry. "Morning, Miss Marple," she called. "Any news about poor Mr. Grayson?" "Not yet," Miss Marple said, pausing. "But I'm sure the truth will come out. Did you see that stranger again? The one in the dark coat?" Mrs. Price shook her head. "Not since that night by the lane. But I heard Mr. Baxter talking to someone on the phone yesterday, sounding cross. Mentioned something about land deals and no more delays. Thought it was odd." Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. "Thank you, Mrs. Price. That's helpful." She walked on, her stick tapping the cobblestones. Mr. Baxter's name kept popping up. First the argument with Mr. Grayson, now a phone call about land. He was no ordinary grocer, she thought. The lane behind Rose Cottage, the boot prints and the cigarette lighter all pointed to someone sneaking around. Thomas Blake was the likely suspect, but Mr. Baxter's role was growing clearer. At the police station, a small stone building by the village square, Inspector Craddock greeted her with a smile. He was a sturdy man with kind eyes, but Miss Marple knew he relied too much on reports and not enough on people's quirks. "Miss Marple, always a pleasure," he said, offering her a chair. "Come to share your wisdom." She smiled faintly. "Just checking on Mr. Grayson's case, Inspector. Any new findings?" Craddock sighed, leaning back. "Nothing new. The doctor's certain it was a heart attack. No signs of foul play. No wounds, no poison. We're closing the case today." Miss Marple's fingers tightened on her stick. "That's quick. Did you check the garden thoroughly? Those roses were his pride. Any damage might tell a story." Craddock raised an eyebrow. "We looked, but it's just a garden. A few broken stems, probably from him falling. Why, you think there's more?" "Oh, I'm just an old lady with too many thoughts," she said lightly. "But I heard Mr. Grayson was approached about selling his cottage. A developer, perhaps? People can get upset over such things." Craddock frowned. "Selling? First I've heard of it. I'll ask around, but it sounds like village gossip." Miss Marple nodded, satisfied. She'd planted the seed. "Thank you, Inspector. I'm sure you'll find the truth." As she left, she felt a prickle of excitement. Craddock would dig into the land deal now, which might lead him to Thomas Blake. But she needed to move faster. The police were good at chasing facts, but they missed the little things, like a crushed rose or a nervous glance, that told the real story. Her next stop was Lucy's cottage. Lucy was in her garden pulling weeds, her face still pale. She jumped when Miss Marple called her name. "Oh, you startled me," Lucy said, brushing dirt from her hands. "I keep thinking someone's watching me." Miss Marple patted her arm. "You're safe, dear, but we need to talk. Have you remembered anything else about that stranger or Mr. Grayson?" Lucy bit her lip, thinking. "There's one thing. The day before Mr. Grayson died, I saw him at the grocer's. He was talking to Mr. Baxter, and it got loud. Mr. Grayson said something like, 'I won't be bullied, not by you or your friend.' I didn't hear the rest, but Mr. Grayson looked angry." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "His friend? Did you see anyone with Mr. Baxter?" "No, but I think he meant the stranger. They were both outside the shop later, talking quietly. I didn't get close enough to hear." Miss Marple nodded, her sheer mind racing. Mr. Grayson's words suggested Mr. Baxter and Thomas Blake were working together. The threatening letter to Lucy might be their way of keeping her quiet. But why Lucy? What had she seen or heard? "Thank you, Lucy," Miss Marple said. "Stay close to home today. I'm going to Mr. Baxter's shop. If anything happens, come straight to my cottage." Lucy nodded, her eyes wide. Miss Marple headed to the grocer's, her steps slow but purposeful. The shop was quieter now, with only a few customers browsing. Mr. Baxter stood behind the counter, sorting apples. His smile faltered when he saw her. "Miss Marple, back so soon?" he said, his voice too cheerful. "Need anything? Fresh tomatoes came in today." "No, thank you," she said, wandering to a shelf of jams. "I was thinking about Mr. Grayson. Lucy said he was upset with you last week. Something about bullying?" Mr. Baxter's face reddened, and he fumbled an apple. "That was nothing, just a silly argument. He got the wrong idea about a delivery, that's all." Miss Marple turned, her eyes gentle but sharp. "He mentioned a friend of yours. Someone pushing him to sell his cottage, perhaps. Land deals can stir up trouble." Mr. Baxter's hands froze. "I don't know anything about that. I'm just a grocer, Miss Marple. I don't deal in land." "Of course," she said, smiling. "But if you hear anything, you'll tell the police, won't you? For Mr. Grayson's sake." He nodded quickly, turning away to help a customer. Miss Marple noticed a stack of papers by the till. Delivery receipts, but one looked different, with handwritten numbers and the words Rose Cottage scrawled at the top. She couldn't read more without drawing attention, but it was enough to confirm her suspicions. Mr. Baxter was involved, and he wasn't alone. Outside, Miss Marple paused by the village green, her mind piecing the puzzle together. Thomas Blake wanted Rose Cottage for a land deal. Mr. Grayson refused. Mr. Baxter, linked to Blake, argued with Mr. Grayson. The stranger's boot prints were in the garden, and a threatening letter warned Lucy to stay quiet. But how did it all connect to a heart attack? She decided to revisit the lane behind Rose Cottage. The clues there, the boot print, the fabric scrap, might hold more answers. The lane was empty when she arrived, the trees casting dappled shadows. She walked slowly, her eyes scanning the ground. Near the fence, she found another clue, a small glass vial, half buried in the mud. It was empty, but a faint chemical smell lingered. She wrapped it in her handkerchief and tucked it into her bag. A heart attack could be natural, but it could also be caused by fear, by poison, by something slipped into a drink. The vial might be nothing, or it might be everything. She needed to get it to Inspector Craddock, but not yet. She had to be sure. As she turned to leave, a shadow moved behind the trees. Miss Marple froze, her heart steady despite the sudden chill. Footsteps crunched softly, then stopped. She gripped her stick, ready to call out, but the shadow vanished. Someone was watching, and they didn't want to be seen. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple spread her clues on the table. The letter, the lighter, the fabric, the vial. She added a note about the shadow in the lane and Mr. Baxter's papers. The puzzle was growing, but the picture was clearer. Thomas Blake and Mr. Baxter were after Rose Cottage. Mr. Grayson's death was no accident, and Lucy was in danger because she'd seen too much. That evening, Lucy arrived breathless. "Miss Marple, I saw him, the stranger by the church. He was talking to Mr. Baxter again, and they looked angry." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "Did you hear anything?" "Just bits," Lucy said. "Something about too late now, and she knows too much. I think they meant me." Miss Marple patted her hand. "You're safe here, dear, but we must be careful. Tomorrow I'll talk to Inspector Craddock again. He needs to know about Thomas Blake." As Lucy left, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting untouched. The village was full of secrets, but she was closing in. The vial, the footprints, the lighter. They all pointed to a plan gone wrong. Thomas Blake was back, and Mr. Baxter was nervous. The shadow in the lane meant someone was still watching. Her needles began to click, slow and steady. The police might be stumped, but Miss Marple wasn't. The truth was like a rose, hidden among thorns, waiting for her to pluck it. Chapter 4. The trap tightens. The dawn light crept over St. Mary Mead, soft and grey, as if the village itself was whispering secrets. Miss Jane Marple sat by her fireplace, her knitting needles still, her notebook open on her lap. The clues she'd gathered. Lucy's threatening letter, the cigarette lighter with TB, the dark wool thread, the boot prints, the glass vial, and Mr. Baxter's shifty behaviour, lay like puzzle pieces in her mind. Last night's news from Lucy, spotting Thomas Blake with Mr. Baxter by the church, had set her thoughts racing. The men were nervous, and nervous people made mistakes. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes sharp despite the early hour. She'd barely slept, not from fear, but from the thrill of the chase. Thomas Blake, the stranger, was back in the village, and his talk of "she knows too much" meant Lucy was in danger. The glass vial, with its faint chemical smell, nagged at her. A heart attack could be caused by more than old age, fear, poison, or a clever trick. She needed to get the vial to Inspector Craddock, but first she had to confirm her suspicions. Today she'd set a gentle trap. Miss Marple knew people revealed their secrets when they thought they were safe. She'd visit Mr. Baxter's shop again, drop a hint about Thomas Blake, and watch his reaction. Then she'd meet Craddock and share just enough to stir the police into action. The truth was close, like a rosebud ready to bloom. She tucked her clues into a small tin box, locked it, and hid it behind her bookshelves. Her cottage felt safe, but the shadow she'd seen in the lane yesterday made her cautious. Someone was watching, and she wasn't foolish enough to leave evidence lying around. Miss Marple put on her coat and hat, grabbed her walking stick, and stepped into the chilly morning. The village was quiet, with only the milkman's cart rattling down the lane. She passed the church, where Lucy had seen Thomas Blake and Mr. Baxter arguing. The grass around the churchyard was trampled, as if someone had paced there in a hurry. She filed the detail away, her mind clicking like her needles. At Mr. Baxter's grocer shop, the shutters were still up, but a light glowed inside. Miss Marple knocked softly. After a moment, Mr. Baxter opened the door, his apron crooked, his face pale. "Miss Marple, you're early. Shop's not open yet." "I won't keep you," she said, her voice mild. "I was passing by and thought I'd ask about that developer, Thomas Blake. I heard he was interested in Mr. Grayson's cottage. Did he ever come to you about it?" Mr. Baxter's eyes widened, and his hand gripped the doorframe. "Blake? Never heard of him. I told you. I'm just a grocer, no land deals here." Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes gentle but piercing. "Oh, my mistake. But I saw a man in a dark coat near your shop last night, talking to someone. Looked like trouble. I hope you're not mixed up in anything, Mr. Baxter." He swallowed, hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "No trouble here. Just busy with deliveries. If you'll excuse me, I've got work to do." He shut the door, a little too fast. Miss Marple smiled faintly. She'd rattled him, and rattled people talked, or ran. She noticed a fresh scratch on the doorframe, as if something heavy had scraped it. A crate? Or something else? She made a mental note and walked on. Her next stop was Lucy's cottage. Lucy was in her kitchen, stirring a pot of jam, her hands shaky. "Miss Marple, I barely slept," she said, her voice low. "I keep thinking about that letter. What if they come after me?" "You're safe for now," Miss Marple said, patting her arm. "But I need your help. Did Mr. Grayson ever mention anything about his cottage? A will, perhaps, or someone wanting to buy it?" Lucy frowned, thinking. "Once, a few weeks ago, he said he'd never sell, no matter how much money they offered. He said the cottage was for someone special, but he didn't say who. I thought he meant a relative." Miss Marple's heart quickened. A will. That could be the key. If Mr. Grayson had left Rose Cottage to someone, it might explain why Thomas Blake and Mr. Baxter were so desperate. "Thank you, Lucy. Stay inside today and lock your doors. I'll check on you later." At the police station, Inspector Craddock was sipping coffee, his desk piled with papers. He stood when Miss Marple entered, his smile warm but tired. "Miss Marple, twice in 2 days? You're keeping me busy." "I hope I'm not a bother," she said, sitting down. "I've been thinking about Mr. Grayson. Did you find out anything about that developer I mentioned? Or perhaps a will?" Craddock rubbed his chin. "We asked around about the land deal. Seems a London firm was sniffing around, but Mr. Grayson turned them down flat. No wills turned up yet, but his lawyer's checking. Why? You've got that look, like you know something." Miss Marple smiled. "Just village talk, Inspector, but I found this near Rose Cottage." She pulled the glass vial from her bag, wrapped in her handkerchief. "It was in the lane behind the garden. It has a strange smell. Might be nothing, but I thought you'd want it." Craddock's eyebrows shot up. He took the vial, holding it carefully. "A vial? Could be medicine, or something else. I'll send it to the lab. Anything else you're not telling me?" "Not yet," she said lightly. "But you might ask Mr. Baxter about a man named Thomas Blake. He's been seen around the village, and I hear he's tied to that land deal." Craddock jotted down the name. Thomas Blake, eh? I'll look into it. You're a sharp one, Miss Marple. As she left, Miss Marple felt a spark of satisfaction. The vial would keep Craddock busy, and mentioning Blake would put pressure on Mr. Baxter. She headed to the Blue Boar Inn next, hoping Mr. Dobbs, the innkeeper, had more on Thomas Blake. The inn was quiet, with only a few locals at the bar. Mr. Dobbs was polishing glasses, his face cheerful. Miss Marple, back for more gossip? Just a question, she said, leaning on her stick. That guest, Thomas Blake, did he leave anything behind? A letter, perhaps, or a business card? Mr. Dobbs thought for a moment. Not much, but he dropped this in his room. He pulled a crumpled paper from a drawer. It was a receipt for a train ticket to London, dated the day Mr. Grayson died, with a scribbled note. Meet B at 9, R.C. Lane. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. B could be Baxter, and R.C. was likely Rose Cottage. The note placed Blake in the lane the night Mr. Grayson died. "May I keep this?" she asked. Mr. Dobbs shrugged. "Sure, it's just rubbish." She tucked the receipt into her bag, her mind racing. The pieces were falling into place. Blake and Baxter had met behind Rose Cottage, likely to pressure Mr. Grayson. The vial might hold traces of something used to scare or harm him. But who was the someone special in Mr. Grayson's will? And why threaten Lucy? Back home, Miss Marple spread her clues on the table. The letter, lighter, fabric, vial, and now the receipt. She added a note about the will and the trampled churchyard grass. The trap was tightening, but she needed one more push. She decided to visit Mr. Grayson's lawyer, Mr. Finch, in the afternoon. If a will existed, it might name the heir and the motive. As she ate a quick lunch, a knock came at the door. It was Mrs. Price, her apron twisted in her hands. "Miss Marple, I saw something odd," she whispered. "Mr. Baxter was loading his van just now, but it wasn't groceries. Looked like papers, stacks of them, and he was in a hurry." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "Thank you, Mrs. Price. You've been a great help." After Mrs. Price left, Miss Marple sat back, her knitting needles clicking. Mr. Baxter was running, or at least preparing to. The papers could be evidence, contracts, perhaps, or proof of the land deal. She needed to act fast. If Baxter fled, the truth might vanish with him. That afternoon she visited Mr. Finch's office, a small room above the post office. Mr. Finch, a thin man with thick glasses, greeted her warmly. "Miss Marple, what brings you here?" "I'm curious about Mr. Grayson," she said. "Did he leave a will? I heard he had plans for Rose Cottage." Mr. Finch hesitated, then nodded. "He did, but it's confidential. I can say he left the cottage to someone in the village, not a relative. The will's being processed now." Miss Marple's heart skipped. "Someone in the village? That's kind of him. No trouble with it, I hope." Mr. Finch frowned. "Well, a man came by last week, asking questions. Said he was from a London firm. I didn't tell him anything, but he seemed pushy." "Thank you, Mr. Finch," she said, rising. The air was local, and Blake had been sniffing around. The puzzle was nearly complete. As she walked home, the village felt tense, like a storm was coming. She passed Mr. Baxter's shop, now closed, the van gone. Her trap had worked too well. Baxter was spooked. She hurried to Lucy's cottage, fearing the worst. Lucy was safe, but pale. Miss Marple, I found this under my door." She held out another note in the same messy handwriting. "Leave tonight, or else." Miss Marple's jaw tightened. "Pack a bag, dear. You're staying with me until this is over." That night, as Lucy slept in the spare room, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her clues spread out. Baxter was running, Blake was back, and Lucy was targeted. The will held the key, and the vial might prove murder. Tomorrow, she'd confront Craddock with everything. The trap was set, and the truth was blooming. Chapter 5. The Truth Blooms. The night was heavy in St. Mary Mead, with clouds hiding the stars. Miss Jane Marple sat in her armchair, the fire casting flickering shadows across her cottage. Lucy slept upstairs, safe for now, but the second threatening note, "Leave tonight or else," lay on the table, its words sharp as thorns. Miss Marple's notebook was open, her clues neatly listed. The cigarette lighter with TB, the dark wool thread, the boot prints, the glass vial, the receipt tying Thomas Blake to the lane behind Rose Cottage, and Mr. Baxter's sudden departure with stacks of papers. The will, leaving Rose Cottage to someone in the village, was the missing piece. Miss Marple's mind hummed like a beehive, piecing the puzzle together. She hadn't told Inspector Craddock everything yet. The police needed hard proof, but Miss Marple trusted the small things. Glances, whispers, a crushed rose, that told the truth. Mr. Baxter was running, spooked by her questions, and Thomas Blake was back, lurking like a fox. The vial, with its chemical smell, hinted at foul play. Mr. Grayson's heart attack wasn't natural, she was sure. Someone had caused it, and Lucy was in danger because she knew too much. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. Today she'd confront Craddock with her clues and find out who Mr. Grayson's heir was. The will was the key. Why else would Blake and Baxter be so desperate? She locked her tin box of evidence and tucked it behind the bookshelves. The shadow in the lane yesterday meant someone was watching, and she wasn't taking chances. At dawn, Lucy came downstairs, her face pale but determined. "Miss Marple, I want to help. I can't just hide." Miss Marple smiled. "You're brave, dear, but you must stay safe. I'm going to the police station. If Mr. Baxter or that stranger comes near, run to Mrs. Price's shop. She'll look after you." Lucy nodded, clutching her tea. Miss Marple put on her coat and hat, grabbed her walking stick, and stepped into the chilly morning. The village was quiet, but tension hung in the air like mist. She passed the grocer's shop, its shutters still down, the van gone. Mr. Baxter had fled, but he couldn't have gone far. At the police station, Inspector Craddock was sorting reports, his face tired. He stood when he saw her. "Miss Marple, you're up early. More clues?" "I hope so," she said, sitting down. She pulled the vial, the lighter, the fabric scrap, and the receipt from her bag. These were near Rose Cottage. The vial smells odd. Perhaps the lab can test it. The lighter has TB on it, likely Thomas Blake, the developer asking about land. The receipt places him in the lane the night Mr. Grayson died, and Mr. Baxter's been acting nervous, maybe even running. Craddock's eyes widened as he took the items. "You've been busy. The vial's results aren't back yet, but I'll push them. Thomas Blake, you say. We tracked him to London, but he's back in the area. staying at a motel nearby, and Baxter's van was seen leaving last night. Miss Marple's heart quickened. Did you find Mr. Grayson's will? Craddock nodded. Just came through. He left Rose Cottage to Lucy Hale. No family, but he thought of her like a granddaughter. The lawyer's notifying her today. Miss Marple's breath caught. Lucy was the heir. That explained the threatening notes. She'd inherited the cottage Blake and Baxter wanted. Thank you, Inspector. Keep an eye on Lucy. She's had 2 threatening letters now. Craddock frowned. 2? Why didn't she tell us? She's scared, Miss Marple said, but I'm keeping her safe. You might check Mr. Baxter's shop for papers about land deals. He was loading some into his van. Craddock grabbed his hat. I'm on it. Stay out of trouble, Miss Marple. She smiled faintly. I always do. As she left, her mind raced. Lucy was the target because she owned Rose Cottage now. Blake and Baxter must have planned to scare Mr. Grayson into selling. But something went wrong. The vial could hold poison, or something to trigger a heart attack. She needed to warn Lucy and check the shop before the police got there. She hurried to Lucy's cottage, but it was empty. A note on the table read, Gone to the church to think. Back soon. Miss Marple's stomach tightened. The church, where Lucy had seen Blake and Baxter arguing. It wasn't safe. She headed to the church, her stick tapping quickly. The churchyard was quiet, the trampled grass still visible from the night before. As she neared the gate, she heard voices, low, angry, coming from behind the stone wall. She crept closer, staying hidden behind a yew tree. It was Thomas Blake, his dark coat unmistakable, talking to Mr. Baxter. You idiot, Blake hissed. You weren't supposed to run. Now the police are sniffing around. I had to, Baxter snapped. That old lady's asking too many questions, and the girl's still here. She won't be for long, Blake said, his voice cold. One more note and she'll leave. The cottage will be ours. Miss Marple's heart pounded. She gripped her stick, ready to call out. But footsteps crunched nearby. Lucy appeared, her face pale, frozen at the sight of the men. Before Miss Marple could move, Blake spotted her. You! He shouted, lunging toward Lucy. She screamed, stumbling back. Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice sharp. Stop right there, Mr. Blake. The men froze, shocked to see her. Baxter's face went white. Miss Marple, this isn't... Quiet, she said, her eyes blazing. I know what you've done. You pressured Mr. Grayson to sell, and when he refused, you caused his death. That vial in the lane will prove it. And those notes to Lucy, they stop now. Blake laughed, but it was nervous. You're just an old lady. You've got no proof. Oh, but I do, she said. The police have the vial, the lighter with your initials, and the receipt placing you at Rose Cottage. And Mr. Baxter's papers will show your land deal. Deepens turned to Blake, panicked. You said no one would find out. Shut up, Blake snapped, but his eyes darted to the lane. Before they could move, Inspector Craddock's voice boomed. Stay where you are. He appeared with 2 constables, their boots crunching on the gravel. Thomas Blake, Arthur Baxter, you're under arrest for suspicion of murder. Lucy ran to Miss Marple, trembling. Craddock handcuffed the men, who glared but didn't resist. "Good work, Miss Marple," he said. "The lab just confirmed the vial had traces of a drug that can trigger heart attacks. Looks like they slipped it into Grayson's tea." Miss Marple nodded, her face calm. Mr. Grayson stood in their way, and Lucy was next. But the roses told the truth. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat with Lucy, pouring tea. The police had taken Blake and Baxter, and the papers in Baxter's van confirmed a shady land deal. Mr. Grayson had been poisoned, his heart attack induced to look natural. Lucy, now the owner of Rose Cottage, was safe. "You were so brave," Lucy said, her eyes shining. "How did you know?" Miss Marple smiled. "People are like gardens, dear. You watch them long enough, and their secrets bloom." The fire crackled, and her knitting needles clicked again. St. Mary Mead was quiet once more, but Miss Marple knew it wouldn't stay that way. Secrets always grew, and she'd be ready when they did.